Hello, YouTubers. Welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have 3 episodes for you this morning here on the 4th day of January 2017. And this one will have 4 articles in it. All these URLs, of course, are in the description of the video, so you can pull them up to take a look at them for whatever research you may need. The first one is off of Western Journalism, and it says U.S. military may perform first execution in over 50 years. Army soldier and current death row inmate Ronald Gray could face military execution after U.S. district judge denied his bid for a stay. According to Judge J. Thomas Martin of the U.S. District Court for District of Kansas, the previous stay execution granted to Gray is no longer in effect, which will enable the military to carry out capital punishment. Gray, who was convicted and condemned to death in military court in 1988, was found guilty of 2 rapes and 3 murders in Fayetteville, North Carolina, Fort Bragg, and served as a cook at the time. Gray came close to execution in 2008 when then President George W. Bush signed a warrant authorizing his execution. The court granted Gray a reprieve at the last minute. It has since expired. If Gray is put to death, it will mark the first military execution in over 50 years. The convict to face military execution was John Bennett, who was hung at Fort Leavenworth Prison in 1961 for the rape and attempted murder of an 11-year-old Australian girl. Although death by hanging has been phased out as a means of capital punishment, the military currently authorizes death by lethal injection. And while a military appeals court ruled the death penalty unconstitutional in 1983 due to military sentencing guidelines, such punishment was soon President Ronald Reagan. Furthermore, no service member can be executed unless the president confirms the penalty, and the president also has the power to commute the death sentence. There are currently 5 other former servicemen currently awaiting execution on death row, including the infamous Army Major Nidal Hassan, who was convicted on 13 counts of murder and 32 counts of attempted murder in 2009 assault on Fort Hood. As to whether the Army has plans for an execution, the matter is still unclear. Actions are still pending. There are still pending legal actions associated with the case of inmate Ronald A. Gray. It would be inappropriate to comment, said Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Johnson. Could permit an execution as soon as within the next 30 days. Gray's lawyer could not be reached for comment. The next article that I have for you, state.com, and it says parents suing for Mike Brown's potential future wages, claims academic and medical records irrelevant. The parents of Michael Brown are suing Ferguson, Missouri for the future financial support they have lost due to the death of their son, who was shot by police during a confrontation. They are refusing to allow their son's academic and medical records to be used as evidence. Michael Brown Sr. and Leslie McSpaden want a St. Louis federal judge to scuttle demands for the documents. They say they're irrelevant and call the city's repeated request harassing. Harassing? If the basis of your lawsuit is the future financial support lost because of the death of an 18-year-old, there is probably nothing more relevant than his academic and medical records. Suing a municipality and its police for the death of a criminal shot while threatening a patrol officer seems a lot more like harassment. Michael Brown's death is tragic, but primarily because he didn't have the good sense to realize that trying to take away a police officer's sidearm through a patrol car window was a terribly bad idea. Also tragic is that the people whose responsibility it was to teach him that good sense are now trying to use his death media circus to get paid. Brown's parents are suing the St. Louis suburb of Ferguson, its former police chief, and the white officer who shot their unarmed black son during a confrontation. The parents say they've been deprived of financial support through their son's future potential wages. I, for one, would be interested to find out what the earning potential is for strong-arm theft of tobacco products and repurposing of said tobacco products for cannabis-related activities. The police shooting of Michael Brown and the fake news peddled by the mainstream media, as well as the White House, set fire to Ferguson, Missouri, and other cities around the country. The political motivated narrative was that Brown was an innocent and unarmed gentle giant gunned down by a racist police officer for being black. The slogan, "Hands up, don't shoot," became and remains a rally cry for the Black Lives Matter movement, despite the fact that Brown never assumed such a submissive position. Most of the blame for the nationwide riots and unrest should be placed squarely on the shoulders of President Barack Obama and Attorney General Eric Holder. While in response to terrorist attacks, Obama routinely warned about rushing to judgment before all the facts were known. He and his administration did the exact opposite. In this case, they fanned the flames as people's property burned. From the beginning of his presidency, Obama assumed the worst of law enforcement officers before knowing all the facts. In hindsight, his painfully awkward beer summit to clean up for his impulsively accusing Cambridge, Massachusetts police of stupidity was a sign of where his immaturity and pathetic leadership would ultimately lead the country. His is a legacy of failure, racial tension, and division. Michael Brown's death is tragic, but primarily because he didn't have the good sense to realize that trying to take away a police officer's sidearm through his patrol car window was a terribly bad idea. Also tragic is that the people whose responsibility it was to teach him that good sense are now trying to use his death and the resulting media circus to get paid. All I have for you is off of Young Conservatives, and it says, breaking. Ted Cruz just introduced a bold constitutional amendment. Get the ads to shut off of it here so I can actually read it. There we go. What people loved Senator Ted Cruz during the Republican primaries was that he was a constitutional conservative who followed through with what he preached. For example, last month, Cruz made a move to help President-elect Donald Trump drain the swamp by announcing he'd introduce legislation to limit congressional terms. And there's I guess this is a tweet. It doesn't actually show the Twitter thing on it, but I think it's a tweet. It says, today's Congressman Ron DeSantis and I introduced a constitutional amendment to impose hashtag term limits on members of Congress. The time is now for Congress, with the overwhelming support of the American people, to submit this constitutional amendment to the states for speedy ratification. With control of a decisive majority of the states, the House of Representatives, and the Senate, we have a responsibility to answer the voters' call to action we must deliver. And the U.S. Senate, Washington, D.C., U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, and U.S. Representative Don DeSantis, Republican of Florida, today proposed an amendment to the U.S. Constitution to impose term limits on members of Congress. The amendment would limit U.S. senators to 2 6-year terms and members of the U.S. House of Representatives to 3 2-year terms. D.C. is broken, said Senator Cruz. The American people resoundingly agreed on Election Day, and President-elect Donald Trump has committed to putting government back to work for the American people. It is well past time to put an end to the cronyism and deceit that has transformed Washington into a graveyard of good intentions. The time is now for Congress, with the overwhelming support of the American people, to submit this constitutional amendment to the states for speedy ratification. With control of a decisive majority of the states, the House of Representatives, and the Senate, we have the responsibility to answer the voters' call to action. We must deliver. Term limits are the first step towards reforming Capitol Hill, said Representative DeSantis. Eliminating the political elite and infusing Washington with new blood will restore the citizen legislature that our founding fathers envisioned. The American people have called for increased accountability, and we must deliver. Senator Cruz has been instrumental in efforts to hold Congress accountable, and I look forward to implement term limits. So there you have that one. And the final one in this episode is off of shtfplan.com, and it says it's war. World's purest silver producer prepares to join class action lawsuit against bullion banks for price rigging. Though Wall Street, or let's try that again. Yeah, though Wall Street regulators and the mega banks they purport to regulate have long said that there exists no manipulation in markets, and that anyone making claims to the contrary is nothing short of a conspiracy theorist, revelations suggest that even the most well-known financial institutions on the planet have been actively involved in rigging asset prices. We need to look no further for confirmation of this fact than Deutsche Bank, which last year admitted the precious metals market has been rigged all along and agreed to pay nearly $100 million in settlements resulting from their direct involvement in the manipulation of gold and silver prices. Now that the cat's out of the bag and Deutsche Bank has agreed to turn over documents implicating their or other banks in related schemes, major mining companies are preparing lawsuits of their own. First Majestic Silver CEO Keith Neumeyer, who in 2015 was the first mining company head to issue a public statement on the manipulation of precious metals prices by a small concentration of players, has said that the company's legal team is closely monitoring the situation. Citing loss of revenue, jobs, and shareholder value, Neumeyer said in an interview with SGT Report that his company will likely be preparing legal action against the bullion banks involved in the rigging of prices. I have an intimate knowledge of what goes on the trading floors, on how front running occurs, how horse trading occurs. I've been looking for an opportunity to step in. I've been very vocal. I've talked to many executives that are running other silver companies. When the Deutsche Bank news came out, I sent an email to the law firms I sent an email to law firms that's responsible for this lawsuit, and I had a conference call with 2 lawyers. We spoke about this case. I can tell you that a couple of the CEOs of some silver companies in the States have no interest in pursuing this. Other CEOs have said that they are interested in pursuing this with the First Majestic. We're monitoring this. We're going to follow it. We're likely going to, at some point, add our name to the class action lawsuit. Full interview of Neumeyer's views on the global cash bans, if you want to take a look at that. It says what silver prices may do once the manipulation comes to an end, how precious metals will be affected by the incoming Trump administration, current supply and demand fundamentals, an update on his latest projects, including Silver One Resources. And the article goes on. It says Neumeyer and what appears to be a handful of other CEOs in the industry are preparing to declare war on the banks that have been responsible for the price suppression schemes many knew to exist but couldn't prove until now. The problem was that the fox was left to guard the hen house, which of course led to the inevitable bloodbath. It's quite shocking to me. It's very harmful to the shareholders. It is manipulation, and it's used frequently. There's ways that the regulators can monitor it. They can see it happening. The exchanges know when false bids and offers get put into the system, yet the exchanges don't step in because the exchanges are owned by the banks, and the banks are doing that kind of trading. The system which doesn't work because no one wants to police themselves because they're all making too much money. How does Bank of America or JP Morgan not have a losing day year after year of trading? It's actually impossible. Traders lose money. It happens all the time. Yet they have not had a single losing day for at least a couple years, as far as I know. As Neumeyer correctly highlights, it's impossible for a trader or firm to have such a perfect record unless, of course, they are working the system, which certainly appears to be the case based on the evidence. Now that market manipulations have been proven at the highest levels of the bullion banking system, and with the pressure of lawsuits mounting, there is a distinct possibility that precious metal prices will be allowed to trade freely on the open market. Such a development bodes well for precious metals investors, especially with Donald Trump set to take over the presidency in a few short weeks. Several Trump appointees are gold friendly, which could add further upside potential. On a positive note regarding Trump, he's got a couple of pro-gold individuals that he's appointed to his inner circle, and I'm looking forward to them starting to make some gold-favored policies that will help us as a mining company and our investors as well. Summing up, Neumeier hints that precious metals could do very well in the years to come. We're very certain, or try this again, we're in very uncertain times. The world is changing. If history is any guide, global changes of this magnitude mean that the entrenchment system run by central banks and deep state politics are set to be on a level we may not have witnessed in our lifetimes, which means assets like Bitcoin, gold, silver could become the safer havens of choice for investors. So there you have everything that I have available in this episode, and there'll be 2 more episodes this morning. If you like what we're doing, give it a thumbs up, social media, so everybody gets to hear the news. Be sure and subscribe and click on that little bell and check the box so that you get email alerts every time I put out a show. Keep yourself informed. See you in the next one.